The stranger's knock came just before midnight, desperate and urgent enough to wake Quentin Vance from his first decent sleep in 3 days. He sat up in bed, reaching instinctively for the rifle that leaned against his nightstand before his mind fully registered the sound. The knocking came again, harder this time, accompanied by a voice that cut through the darkness like a blade. "Please, I need help. My brother is dying." Quentin threw off his blankets and pulled on his trousers. Moving quickly through the modest ranch house he had built with his own hands 5 years ago. The New Mexico night air carried a chill that October of 1882, and when he opened the heavy wooden door, he found a woman collapsed against the frame. She straightened immediately, her dark eyes wild with desperation and fear. "Please," she gasped, her chest heaving. "Do you have medicine?" "Anything for fever. My brother was bitten by a rattlesnake 2 days ago, and the fever is eating him alive." Quentin studied her for a moment. She was covered in dust from hard riding, her dark hair falling loose from what had once been a careful braid. Blood stained her dress sleeve, though whether it was hers or her brother's, he could not tell. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with a face that would have been beautiful if not contorted by exhaustion and terror. "Come inside," he said, already moving toward the kitchen where he kept his medical supplies. His father had been a surgeon during the war, and Quentin had inherited both his instruments and his knowledge. "Where is your brother now?" "In a cabin about 3 miles west of here, near the canyon entrance. We were traveling to Santa Fe when it happened." She followed him inside, her boots leaving dusty prints on his clean floor. "I have tried everything I know, but the poison has spread, and now the fever has him hallucinating. He does not even recognize me anymore." Quentin lit a lamp and pulled down a wooden box from the high shelf. Inside were various bottles, bandages, and instruments. "Rattlesnake bite is serious business, especially if it has been 2 days. What treatment did you give him?" "I cut the wound and tried to suck out the poison, then packed it with tobacco and bound it tight. But the swelling kept spreading, and yesterday the fever started." Her voice cracked. "He is all I have left in this world. Our parents died last year in a fire. Please, you have to help him." He turned to look at her fully for the first time, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten. There was a strength there beneath the desperation, a determination that spoke of someone who had survived much and refused to give up. "What is your name?" "Zara Richards. And my brother is Thomas." "He is only 19 years old. He cannot die like this, not after everything we have survived." Quentin grabbed his medical bag and began filling it with supplies. "I am Quentin Vance. I will come with you and see what can be done, but I cannot make promises. 2 days is a long time with rattlesnake venom in the blood." "Thank you," she breathed, and he saw her shoulders sag slightly with relief. "Thank you. I knocked on 2 other doors before I found your ranch. No one else would even open their door to me. People around here are cautious of strangers, especially at night." He pulled on his boots and grabbed his coat. "My horse is in the barn. We can ride together if yours needs rest." "Mine is nearly dead on her feet. I pushed her hard to find help." They moved quickly to the barn, where Quentin's sturdy gelding, Ranger, nickered softly at the intrusion. Within minutes they were mounted, Zara sitting behind him with her arms wrapped around his waist. He tried not to notice how she felt pressed against his back, tried not to think about anything except the medical emergency ahead. The ride to the cabin took 20 minutes at a hard pace. Zara directed him through the darkness with whispered instructions, and when they arrived, he could see it was little more than an abandoned homestead, half collapsed and clearly uninhabited for years. Inside, illuminated by a single flickering candle, lay a young man on a bedroll. His face was flushed red with fever, his breathing labored and rattling. His left leg was massively swollen from the knee down, the skin tight and discolored. Quentin knelt beside him immediately, feeling for a pulse. It was rapid and thready, not a good sign. "Thomas, can you hear me?" The young man's eyes opened but did not focus. He muttered something incoherent about water and horses. "How long has he been like this?" Quentin asked, already unwrapping the makeshift bandage on the leg. "Since this morning. Last night he could still talk to me, tell me he was thirsty, but today he just rambles." Zara knelt on the other side of her brother, taking his hand. "Is he going to die?" Quentin examined the bite wound. It was infected, that much was clear, and the swelling indicated the venom had done significant damage to the tissue. But Thomas was young and had made it 2 days already, which meant he had a fighting chance. "He might," Quentin said honestly, because false hope helped no one. "But he also might not. The fact that he is still breathing means his body is fighting. We need to lance this wound properly, clean out the infection, and get the fever down. It will be painful and he will fight us even in his delirium. Tell me what to do." For the next 3 hours, they worked together. Quentin made careful incisions to drain the infected tissue, while Zara held her brother down, tears streaming down her face as Thomas screamed and thrashed. They packed the wound with poultices made from the herbs Quentin had brought, then wrapped it in clean bandages. Zara sponged her brother's burning skin with cool water while Quentin forced willow bark tea between his cracked lips. "Talk to me about something else," Zara said suddenly as dawn began to lighten the sky outside. "I cannot bear to sit in silence anymore, wondering if each breath will be his last." Quentin understood. "What brought you and your brother out here? You said you were traveling to Santa Fe." "We owned a small farm in Missouri, but after our parents died, we could not keep up with the mortgage. The bank took everything. We heard there were opportunities in New Mexico territory, that the railroad was expanding and they needed workers, needed people to build new towns. Thomas wanted to try his hand at mining, and I thought I might find work as a teacher or a seamstress." She wrung out the cloth in the basin of water, her movements mechanical. "Stupid dreams, I suppose. We barely made it 100 miles before this happened." "They are not stupid dreams," Quentin said. "Santa Fe needs teachers. Abiquiu needs teachers. There is a schoolhouse in town, but no one to run it properly." "Abiquiu, the nearest town, about 8 miles east of my ranch. Population maybe 200 but growing. It sits along the old Spanish Trail, so we get traders and travelers passing through regular." He checked Thomas's pulse again and was relieved to find it slightly stronger. "I moved here 5 years ago from Texas. Bought the land with money I saved working cattle drives up from San Antonio. Built the ranch house myself, one board at a time. Do you run cattle?" "Some. Mostly I breed horses. The army pays good money for trained mounts and the work suits me better than chasing cows across open range." He met her eyes across her brother's still form. "I like the quiet. Like building something that will last." She studied him in the growing light, really seeing him for the first time. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of dark honey. His hands were calloused but moved with surprising gentleness as he adjusted the blanket over her brother. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel safer than she had in months. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You do not know us. We could be thieves or worse." Quentin considered the question. "My father used to say that we are judged not by what we do when it is convenient, but by what we do when it costs us something. You needed help. I had the skills to provide it. Seems simple enough to me. Most people do not see it that way. Most people are fools." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You are a strange man, Quentin Vance. I have been called worse." Thomas's breathing had settled into a more regular rhythm, and his skin felt slightly cooler to the touch. The crisis was not over, but they had turned a corner. Quentin showed Zara how to check the wound for fresh bleeding and how much willow bark tea to give her brother throughout the day. "I need to get back to my ranch and tend to my animals," he said, as the sun crested the horizon. "But I will return this afternoon to check on him. Keep the wound clean and keep him cool. If the fever spikes again or if he stops breathing regularly, send for me immediately. I do not know how to repay you for this. There is nothing to repay. Just focus on keeping your brother alive." He gathered his instruments back into his bag. "There is a well around the back of this cabin. The water should be clean enough. Do you have food?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "We ate the last of our provisions yesterday." Without a word, Quentin went outside to his horse and returned with a cloth-wrapped package from his saddlebag. "Bread, cheese, and dried beef. It will hold you until I come back. I cannot take your food. You need to keep your strength up if you are going to nurse your brother. Besides, I have plenty more at the ranch." He pressed the package into her hands, noticing how thin her fingers were, how prominent the bones of her wrists. They had been struggling for longer than just the past 2 days. "Eat, Miss Richards. That is an order." She clutched the package to her chest, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will never forget this kindness." Quentin nodded and left before the gratitude in her voice could do something strange to his heart. He had lived alone for 5 years, content with his horses and his quiet life. He did not need complications, especially not in the form of a beautiful woman with desperate eyes and nowhere to go. But as he rode back toward his ranch in the golden morning light, he could not stop thinking about the way she had looked at her brother, the fierce protectiveness in every line of her body. Could not stop feeling the ghost of her arms around his waist during the ride to the cabin. The day passed slowly. He went through his routines mechanically, feeding the horses, checking the fences, working with a young mare that still needed training. But his mind kept drifting back to the abandoned cabin and the woman keeping vigil there. True to his word, he returned that afternoon with more supplies. He found Zara sitting beside her brother, reading aloud from a battered book. Thomas was still unconscious but seemed more peaceful, his fever lower. "You read to him?" Quentin asked as he examined the wound. "Our mother used to read to us when we were children. I thought perhaps it might comfort him, even if he cannot understand the words." She closed the book. "I have been giving him the willow bark tea every 2 hours like you showed me. The fever comes and goes, but it does not seem as high as before." Quentin nodded approvingly. "The wound looks better. No fresh infection. I think he has a real chance now." Over the next 5 days, Quentin visited twice daily, morning and evening. He brought fresh food, clean bandages, and medicine. But more than that, he found himself staying longer each visit, talking with Zara while they watched over Thomas together. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her father who had been a schoolteacher before he turned to farming, about her mother's flower garden that bloomed every spring. She spoke of her dreams to teach, to have a classroom full of children, to make a difference in young lives the way her father had. He told her about Texas, about losing his own parents to cholera when he was 17, about working cattle drives for 8 years to save enough money to buy land. He spoke of his vision for the ranch, of breeding the finest horses in New Mexico territory, of building something lasting and good. On the 6th day, Thomas woke. Quentin arrived for his morning visit to find Zara weeping with joy, her brother's hand clasped in both of hers. "He asked for water," she said through her tears. "He looked right at me and asked for water and knew who I was." Thomas was weak as a kitten and confused about the lost days, but his eyes were clear, and the fever had broken completely. Quentin examined him thoroughly and declared him out of danger. "You will need to stay off that leg for at least another 2 weeks," he told the young man. "The wound is healing, but the muscles and tissue need time to recover. Walk on it too soon and you could do permanent damage." "We will stay here then," Zara said. "We have trespassed on your kindness long enough already." Quentin looked around the dilapidated cabin with its holes in the roof and gaps in the walls. Winter was coming. The nights were already cold. This place would be unbearable in another month. "No," he said firmly. "You will come to my ranch." Both siblings stared at him. "We cannot possibly," Zara began. "You can and you will. This cabin is not fit for habitation, especially not for a man recovering from severe illness. I have a spare bedroom. Thomas can convalesce there properly while you figure out your next steps." "Sir, we could never repay such generosity," Thomas said, his voice still weak but earnest. "Then do not think of it as something requiring repayment. Think of it as neighbors helping neighbors." Quentin stood, making it clear the matter was settled. "I will bring a wagon tomorrow morning. Make sure he is ready to be moved." That night, alone in his ranch house, Quentin questioned his own judgment. He had lived alone by choice, had built his solitary life deliberately after years of chaos and crowds on the cattle drives. Inviting these strangers into his home went against every instinct of self-preservation he possessed. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Zara's face in the lamplight as she rayed to her unconscious brother, the tender way she had bathed his fevered skin, the steel in her spine that refused to break even when hope seemed lost. He saw strength and kindness, and a fierce, protective love that reminded him of everything good in the world. The next morning, he hitched up his wagon and loaded it with blankets and pillows to make the journey easier on Thomas. When he arrived at the cabin, he found them waiting, their few possessions already packed. Zara had cleaned the cabin as best she could, a gesture of respect for the shelter it had provided, however inadequate. The journey to the ranch was slow and careful. Thomas bore the jostling with gritted teeth, and Zara sat beside him in the wagon bed, supporting his shoulders. Quentin drove with steady hands, avoiding the worst of the ruts. When they arrived, he helped Thomas inside and settled him in the spare bedroom. It was a simple room but clean and comfortable, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the horse pastures. "I do not have words," Thomas said as Quentin helped him settle against the pillows. "You have saved my life and now you open your home to us." "I swear to you, sir, as soon as I am well enough, I will work to repay this debt." "Focus on healing first," Quentin replied. "The rest will sort itself out." He left the young man to rest and found Zara standing in the main room of the house, looking around with wide eyes. It was not a fancy place by any measure, but it was well built and solid. The furniture was handmade but sturdy. Books lined one wall and the kitchen was well stocked and organized. "Where should I sleep?" she asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither wanted to examine too closely. "You can have my room," he said. "I will sleep out here on the sofa. It will only be for a couple weeks until Thomas is stronger, and then we can figure out more permanent arrangements." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. You have been sleeping on the floor of that cabin for nearly a week. You need real rest if you are going to be any good to your brother." He grabbed a blanket from the chest by the fireplace. "The matter is settled." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was written in every line of her body. "You are a stubborn man, so I have been told." That first day set the pattern for the weeks that followed. Quentin went about his ranch work, tending to his horses and maintaining his property. Zara nursed her brother and gradually took over the household chores, cooking and cleaning with a competence that spoke of years of practice. Thomas healed slowly but steadily, his natural youth and strength reasserting themselves. But something else was growing in that house, something neither Quentin nor Zara wanted to acknowledge but could not ignore. It was in the way their hands would brush when passing dishes at dinner, the way their eyes would meet across the room and hold for a moment too long. It was in the late evening conversations by the fireplace after Thomas had gone to sleep, talking about everything and nothing until the candles burned low. 2 weeks became 3, then 4. Thomas was up and walking now, insisting on helping with chores despite Quentin's protests. The young man had a natural way with horses, and Quentin found himself teaching him the finer points of training and care. "He likes you," Zara said one evening as they watched Thomas work with one of the yearlings in the corral. "I have not seen him smile this much since before our parents died. He is a good worker, patient. Horses respond to that. He needs something to believe in again. Losing the farm, losing everything we knew, it broke something in him. But here, working with you, I can see him coming back to himself." Quentin turned to look at her. In the golden light of late afternoon, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her face relaxed, she was breathtaking. "What about you, Zara? What do you need?" The question caught her off guard. "I need my brother to be well. I need to know we will survive. Thomas is well. And you will survive. So what do you need for yourself?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know any more. I spent so long just trying to keep us alive, to keep moving forward, that I forgot to think about what comes after. You mentioned teaching. That was a dream from another life. Dreams do not die just because circumstances change. Abiquiu still needs a teacher." She shook her head. "I have no credentials, no formal training. My father taught me, but that does not qualify me to teach others. You read and write better than most. You know arithmetic and history and literature. The children in Abiquiu are growing up ignorant because no one will take responsibility for educating them. The town council would probably pay you a salary if you agreed to run the schoolhouse. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we complicate things by overthinking them." He took a breath, knowing he was about to step over a line but unable to stop himself. "Stay, Zara. You and Thomas both. There is room here. He can work with the horses and learn the trade. You can teach in Abiquiu, build the life you dreamed about." Her eyes searched his face. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want you to stay," he said simply. "Because these past weeks, having you here, having voices and life in this house, I have realized how lonely I have been. I told myself I liked the solitude, that I preferred living alone, but I was lying to myself. Quentin, I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give," he said quickly. "Just stay. Let us see what happens." Before she could answer, Thomas called out from the corral, laughing as the young horse nuzzled his pocket looking for treats. The moment broke, and Zara turned away, but not before Quentin saw the conflict in her eyes. That night, after Thomas had retired to his room, Zara found Quentin on the porch. The November air was cold, promising the winter to come. "I spoke with Thomas," she said without preamble, "about your offer." Quentin's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "What did he say?" "He wants to stay. Says he has learned more about horses in 4 weeks with you than he learned about farming in his whole life. Says this feels like the fresh start we were looking for." She wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. "But I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of being a burden. Of depending on someone's charity. Of what happens if you change your mind and decide you want your quiet life back." He stood and moved closer to her, close enough to see the way her breath made small clouds in the cold air. "You are not a burden, Zara. You have taken over running this household and improved it beyond measure. Thomas is proving himself invaluable with the horses, and as for changing my mind—" He paused, gathering his courage. I think the real fear is that I will not change my mind. That every day I will want you here more, not less." She looked up at him, and in the moonlight he could see tears shining in her eyes. "I am afraid of that too. Then let us be afraid together." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. "Stay, Zara, please." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we will stay." The kiss that followed was gentle and sweet, a promise of things to come. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The next day, Quentin rode into Abiquiu and spoke with the town council about opening the schoolhouse. The council members were enthusiastic, especially when he offered to cover the costs of supplies until the town could budget for them properly. Within a week, Zara was preparing lessons and cleaning out the small building that would become her classroom. She started with 6 students, and by the end of the first month had 12. The children of Abiquiu were hungry for learning, and Zara proved to be a natural teacher, patient and creative and demanding in equal measure. Parents began stopping by the ranch to thank Quentin for bringing her to town. Winter settled over New Mexico in earnest. Snow dusted the peaks of the surrounding mountains, and ice formed on the water troughs each morning. But inside the ranch house, everything was warm. Thomas proved himself over and over, working long hours with the horses and taking on more responsibility. He was growing into manhood under Quentin's mentorship, finding confidence and purpose. In the evenings, they would sit around the dinner table, the 3 of them, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Quentin and Zara's relationship deepened slowly, built on a foundation of respect and genuine partnership. They were courting, though no formal declaration had been made. It was in the way he would bring her coffee while she graded papers in the evening, the way she would mend his shirts without being asked. It was in stolen kisses when Thomas was out in the barn, in long talks after the house grew quiet, in the way they orbited each other like binary stars. Christmas came, and with it, the first real celebration the ranch house had ever seen. Zara decorated with pine branches and baked cookies using her mother's recipes. Thomas carved small wooden horses as gifts. Quentin surprised them both with new winter coats, quality wool that would keep them warm through the coldest months. On Christmas Eve, after Thomas had gone to bed, Quentin and Zara sat by the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and outside fresh snow was falling. "I have something for you," Quentin said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. Zara's eyes widened. "You already gave me the coat. That was practical. This is personal." She unwrapped it carefully to find a simple silver locket. Inside was a tiny, perfect painting of the ranch house with the mountains behind it. "Quentin, this is beautiful. Where did you?" "I rode to Santa Fe last week. Had a jeweler make it special." He reached out and fastened it around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. "I wanted you to have something that represented home, this home, your home." She touched the locket with trembling fingers. "I love it. I will treasure it always." "Zara, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." He took both her hands in his. "When you knocked on my door that night asking for medicine, I had no idea you were going to change my entire life. I thought I knew what I wanted, thought I had everything figured out. But these past months with you have shown me how wrong I was. I was not living. I was just existing. You brought life and joy and purpose back into my world." "Quentin, let me finish," he said gently. "I love you, Zara Richards. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you read to your brother and the way you teach your students. I love how you hum while you cook and how you leave books open on every surface. I love you, and I want you to stay not as a guest but as my wife. Will you marry me?" The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over, running down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Quentin. I think I started loving you that first night when you did not hesitate to help a desperate stranger. Every day since then I have fallen deeper. Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly, deeply, pouring all his love and hope and dreams into that connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should tell Thomas," Zara said, laughing through her tears. "In the morning. Tonight I just want to sit here with my future wife and watch the fire." They were married in February of 1883 in the small church in Abiquiu. Thomas stood as Quentin's best man, beaming with pride. Half the town turned out for the celebration, grateful for the teacher who had brought education to their children, and charmed by the love story that had unfolded in their midst. The wedding was simple but joyful, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. As Quentin and Zara danced their first dance as husband and wife, he pulled her close and whispered, "No regrets." "Not a single one," she whispered back. "You gave me healing in ways I never expected. I came asking for medicine for my brother's body, but you healed my spirit, my heart, my very soul." "We healed each other," he replied. "I was dead inside before you arrived. You brought me back to life." After the wedding, Thomas moved into the bunkhouse Quentin had built for ranch hands, giving the newlyweds privacy. But he remained an integral part of the ranch, continuing to work with the horses and developing a real talent for training difficult mounts. Married life suited both Quentin and Zara. They fell into an easy rhythm, balancing work and love and building their life together. Zara continued teaching, and the school grew to 18 students by spring. Quentin's horse breeding business flourished, partly due to Thomas's hard work and innovative training methods. In May, Zara discovered she was pregnant. The joy in the house was palpable. Thomas was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an uncle, immediately starting work on a cradle. Quentin was simultaneously terrified and elated, hovering over Zara until she threatened to hit him with a wooden spoon if he did not give her space. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said, laughing at his worried face. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "But those women were not my wife," he countered. "Those women were not carrying my child." She softened and took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. "I am strong, Quentin, you know this. Have faith." He did have faith, but he still worried. He read every book on pregnancy and childbirth he could get his hands on, riding to Santa Fe to consult with doctors, preparing obsessively for every possible complication. Zara bore it all with amused patience, continuing to teach until she was 7 months along, and her students started insisting she sit down more. The women of Abiquiu rallied around her, bringing baby clothes and advice and warm friendship. In December of 1883, during a gentle snowfall, Zara went into labor. Quentin fetched the midwife while Thomas paced nervously in the main room. The labor was long but not overly complicated, and as dawn broke over the ranch, a baby's cry split the air. Quentin rushed into the bedroom to find Zara exhausted but radiant, holding a squirming bundle. "A son," she said, smiling. "We have a son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. Something cracked open in his chest, a wellspring of love so fierce it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Quentin whispered. "You are perfect." They named him Jacob after Zara's father, and the boy became the center of their world. Thomas was a devoted uncle, teaching his nephew about horses before the child could even walk. Zara took a brief break from teaching but found she missed it, and returned part-time when Jacob was 6 months old, bringing him to school with her when he was small. The years flowed by like a river, each season bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch prospered. Quentin's horses gained a reputation for quality throughout the territory, and he found himself turning down more orders than he could accept. Thomas became a full partner in the business, his percentage of the profits allowing him to build his own small house on the property. In 1885, Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Clara. She had her father's hazel eyes and her mother's dark hair, and a temperament that could only be described as fierce. Jacob adored his little sister, appointing himself her protector from the moment she entered the world. The schoolhouse in Abiquiu grew too small for the number of students, and the town built a larger one with Quentin's financial backing. Zara trained 2 assistant teachers, expanding the program to offer education to children of all ages. She became something of a local legend, the woman who had brought learning and opportunity to an entire generation. Thomas met and courted a young woman named Zara, the daughter of a merchant in Abiquiu. They married in 1886, and Zara proved to be a perfect match for him, sharing his love of horses and his quiet, steady nature. They built their own life while remaining close to Quentin and Zara, their houses near enough that their future children would grow up like siblings. In 1888, Zara gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Michael. He was a calm baby, content to watch the world with serious eyes, so different from his boisterous siblings. "Our family is complete," Zara said one evening as they watched their 3 children play in the yard. Jacob was teaching Clara how to ride a gentle pony while baby Michael watched from his father's arms. "Is it?" Quentin asked, kissing the top of her head. "It is perfect," she corrected. "Everything is perfect," and it was. The ranch that had once been Quentin's solitary refuge had become a home filled with love and laughter. The quiet life he had built had been transformed into something richer than he could have imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, they stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. The children were inside with Thomas and Zara, being thoroughly spoiled by their aunt and uncle. "You ever think about that night?" Quentin asked. "When you knocked on my door asking for medicine?" "Every day," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace. "I was so desperate, so afraid. I thought I was just looking for medicine to save my brother's life. I had no idea I was finding my salvation, my future, my home." "You gave me all those things too. I was so lonely before you came, but I did not even realize it. I had convinced myself that isolation was peace, that I was content, but I was just hiding from life." She turned in his arms to face him. "You did not hesitate that night. When I knocked, desperate and dirty and demanding, you opened the door without question. You helped us without asking for anything in return. That is who you are, Quentin Vance. That is the man I fell in love with. I fell in love with you the moment I saw the way you fought for your brother. The way you refused to give up even when hope seemed lost. I saw your strength and your love, and I wanted to be worthy of that. You are worthy. You have always been worthy." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for saving us, both of us. Thank you for giving us a home. Thank you for making this house into a home. Thank you for bringing life and love and chaos and joy. Thank you for choosing me." Inside, they could hear the children laughing, hear Thomas and Zara joining in the fun. Outside, the horses nickered softly in the barn. In the distance, the mountains stood eternal against the darkening sky. "Tell me," Zara said, smiling up at her husband. "If you could go back to that night, knowing everything that would follow, would you still open the door?" "In a heartbeat," he replied without hesitation. "Every single time I would open that door. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara. You and our children and the life we have built together. I would not change a single moment. Not even when Clara drew on the walls with mud," he laughed. Not even then. Well, maybe that moment. Just a little. She laughed too, the sound bright and free. I love you, Quentin Vance. I love you too, Zara Vance. Forever. They stood together as the stars began to emerge, the first chapter of their life long completed, but so many more chapters yet to be written. The ranch that had witnessed their first meeting, first kiss, first everything, stood solid and strong around them. Inside, Jacob was telling his sister and brother about the new horse Quentin had promised to let him train. Clara was insisting she would train one too, even though she was only 3. Michael was probably sleeping through the whole discussion, true to his peaceful nature. Come on, Zara said, tugging Quentin toward the door. Our family awaits. Our family, he repeated, loving the sound of those words. Yes, let us go join our family. They walked inside together, hands intertwined, stepping into the warm light and love that filled every corner of the house. Behind them, the door closed on the cold night, but within, the hearth burned bright and steady. Time continued its march forward. The children grew, each developing their own distinct personalities and dreams. Jacob developed his father's and uncle's gift with horses, showing patience and intuition beyond his years. By the time he was 12, he was training mounts that sold for premium prices, his reputation spreading through the territory. Clara, true to her fierce nature, refused to be limited by expectations of what a girl should or should not do. She learned to ride as well as any man, helped with the ranch work, and declared her intention to become a veterinarian. When people scoffed at the idea of a woman in such a profession, she simply worked harder, studying every book on animal medicine she could find. Michael, gentle Michael, surprised everyone by developing a passion for teaching. He would follow his mother to the schoolhouse whenever he could, watching how she engaged with students, how she made learning come alive. Zara's heart swelled with pride, knowing her youngest would carry on the work she loved. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children of their own, and the 2 families remained as close as blood. The children grew up more siblings than cousins, playing together, learning together, building friendships that would last their entire lives. In 1895, New Mexico Territory continued to grow and change. The railroad expanded, bringing more settlers and more opportunity. Abiquiu transformed from a small trading post town into a thriving community. The schoolhouse expanded again, and Zara hired 3 more teachers to handle the influx of students. Quentin's ranch became one of the most successful in the region. His horses were sought after throughout the West, known for their intelligence, stamina, and trainability. He hired several hands to help with the work, building a bunkhouse and creating jobs for young men learning the trade. But despite their success and prosperity, Quentin and Zara never forgot where they came from. They remembered poverty and desperation, remembered the kindness of strangers that could change a life. They gave generously to their community, helping families in need, funding scholarships for promising students, supporting the church and the town in countless ways. One evening in 1897, a knock came at the door. It was late, nearly midnight, and the sound transported both Quentin and Zara back 15 years to another midnight knock that had changed everything. Quentin opened the door to find a young couple, exhausted and desperate, their wagon broken down a mile from the ranch. "Please," the woman said, "we need help. Our daughter is sick with fever and we do not know what to do." Quentin did not hesitate, just as he had not hesitated all those years ago. "Come in. Let me get my medical supplies." Zara was already moving toward the kitchen, stoking the fire and putting water on to boil. Their eyes met across the room, understanding passing between them without words. They spent the night helping the family, treating the child's fever, repairing the wagon. As dawn broke, the little girl was sleeping peacefully, her fever broken. "How can we repay you?" the father asked, echoing words Zara had spoken so long ago. "There is nothing to repay," Quentin said, repeating his own words from that distant night. "Just take care of your daughter and be safe on the road." After the family left, their wagon repaired and supplies replenished, Zara came to stand beside her husband on the porch. "It never gets old, does it?" she said softly. "The chance to help someone when they need it most." "No, it does not. It reminds me of what is important, reminds me of the night that brought you into my life." She leaned against him, comfortable after so many years together. "Do you think they will be all right? That family?" "I think they will be better than all right. I think they will remember this night, remember that strangers helped them when they needed it most. Maybe they will pass that kindness on to someone else someday." "Creating ripples," Zara said. "One act of kindness creating ripples that spread outward. You are the one who taught me that. Before you came, I kept to myself. I would have helped someone in dire need, but I would not have opened my life to them the way I did to you and Thomas. You taught me that real generosity means giving not just things but yourself." "We taught each other," she corrected. "You showed me that I could trust again, that not everyone would disappoint or abandon me. You gave me stability when my world was chaos." Inside, they could hear Michael stirring, probably woken by the commotion. Soon the whole house would be awake and the day would begin in earnest. But for now, in the quiet moments before dawn fully broke, they stood together and watched the sky lighten. By 1900, Jacob was 17 and already making a name for himself as a horseman. He had his father's steady hands and his uncle's intuitive understanding of equine nature. Several neighboring ranches had approached him with job offers, but he wanted to stay and build something with his family. Clara at 15 was petitioning to study with the veterinarian, who came through from Santa Fe twice a year. The man was initially skeptical of taking on a female apprentice, but changed his mind after watching her work with a difficult birth in one of the mares. She had a gift, he admitted, and it would be wrong to waste it based on outdated prejudices. Michael at 12 was already assisting his mother at the schoolhouse, showing natural teaching ability that made Zara's heart sing. He had a gift for making complex concepts simple, for reaching students who struggled. Thomas's children were equally exceptional in their own ways. His oldest son had a head for business and was helping expand the ranch's reach into new markets. His daughter was an artist whose sketches of ranch life were starting to gain recognition. His youngest was still finding his way but showed promise in everything he tried. The two families gathered every Sunday for dinner, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter and love. Those dinners were sacred time, when work stopped and family came first. Stories were told, news was shared, and the bonds that held them all together were reinforced and celebrated. One Sunday in late summer, after dinner had been cleared and the younger children were playing outside, Thomas stood and cleared his throat. "I have an announcement," he said, and the room fell quiet. "Sarah and I have decided to buy the old Peterson place north of here. It is time for us to strike out on our own, build our own legacy." There was a moment of silence, then Quentin stood and embraced his brother-in-law. "That is wonderful news. You have earned this, Thomas. You have worked hard and learned well. I am proud of you." "I learned from the best," Thomas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life all those years ago, and you gave me more than medicine. You gave me purpose, family, a future. Everything I am, everything I have accomplished started the night my sister knocked on your door." Zara was crying openly now, standing to hug her brother. "You will be close, though. You will not go far, just 5 miles. close enough to see you all the time, far enough to build our own place." He pulled back to look at her. "You gave up so much for me, Zara. You sacrificed your own dreams to keep me alive after Mom and Dad died. I never properly thanked you for that. You are my brother. You never needed to thank me." "Maybe not, but I am thanking you anyway. You and Quentin both. You gave me life twice. Once when you found medicine for the snake bite, and again when you brought me here and gave me a reason to live." He looked around the room at the family gathered there. "This is what I want to build. This kind of love, this kind of legacy. And I learned how by watching you too." It was a bittersweet moment, celebrating Thomas's success while knowing the daily rhythms of their joined lives would change. But it was right. He was ready to lead his own family, to build his own future while maintaining the bonds that had sustained them all. The years continued to unspool. Jacob met and married a woman from Santa Fe, a doctor's daughter who shared his love of horses. They settled on a portion of Quentin's land and began their own breeding program, specializing in horses for medical professionals and families. Their expertise complemented Quentin's military contracts perfectly. Clara was accepted as a formal apprentice to the veterinarian and dove into her studies with characteristic determination. She faced skepticism and outright hostility from some quarters, but she faced it all with her head high and her skills sharp. Slowly, grudgingly, she earned respect. Michael took over more and more of the teaching duties as Zara reduced her hours, her energy not what it once was. But she loved watching her son work, loved seeing her passion pass to the next generation. In 1905, Quentin and Zara celebrated their 22nd anniversary. Their hair was touched with gray now, their faces lined with laugh lines and the marks of time well spent. They stood on the same porch where they had shared so many moments, watching the sun set over land they had built into a legacy. 22 years, Zara mused. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I knocked on your door, desperate and dirty and demanding medicine. "The best night of my life," Quentin said firmly. "The night my real life began. We have built something beautiful, have we not? Not just the ranch or the school, but this family, this love, this life. We have built something that will last." Jacob is already teaching his son about horses. Michael talks about expanding the school into a full academy. Clara will revolutionize veterinary medicine in this territory. Our grandchildren will inherit not just land or money, but values, purpose, love. "That is the truest legacy," Zara agreed. "Love that ripples outward, touching lives, changing futures, like the night you helped us. You changed our future, and we changed yours, and together we have changed our children's futures and our grandchildren's futures. All because you were brave enough to knock on a stranger's door at midnight. All because you were good enough to answer." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. "I would do it all again, you know. Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear. It was all worth it to end up here with you. As would I. Every single moment was worth it." They fell silent, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside, they could hear their grandchildren laughing as Jacob and his wife got them ready for bed. The house was full again tonight, 3 generations under one roof for the weekend. Grandma, Grandpa. The youngest granddaughter burst onto the porch, her nightgown flapping. "Tell us the story, please." "What story, little one?" Zara asked, though she knew perfectly well. "The story of how you met, how Grandma knocked on the door and Grandpa saved Uncle Thomas and then you fell in love." Quentin and Zara exchanged smiles. The children never tired of hearing the story, though they had heard it countless times. "All right," Zara said, opening her arms as the child climbed into her lap. The other grandchildren, hearing the commotion, came tumbling out to join them. It was October of 1882, and I was desperate. As she told the story, Quentin watched her face, still beautiful to him after all these years. He thought about the terrified young woman who had knocked on his door and the strong, confident woman she had become. He thought about the journey they had taken together, the life they had built. When the story ended with their wedding, the children clapped and demanded another story. But their parents intervened, herding them back to bed with promises of more stories tomorrow. Finally alone again, Quentin and Zara remained on the porch, reluctant to end the day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had knocked on someone else's door that night?" Zara asked. "If I had found help somewhere else?" "No," Quentin said firmly. "I do not believe in that kind of chance. I think you were meant to find my door. I think we were meant to find each other." "Fate, love," he corrected. "Not the feeling, though that too. But love as a force in the universe, drawing together the people who need each other, who can heal each other, who can build something beautiful together. That is rather poetic for a rancher. You bring out the poet in me." She laughed, the sound still as bright as it had been 22 years ago. "Take me inside, husband. I am tired and tomorrow will come too soon. Inside to our bed in our house full of family, inside to the life we built together." He stood and offered his hand, pulling her gently to her feet. "Inside to home." "Home," she echoed, loving the word, loving everything it meant. "Yes, let us go home." They walked inside together, closing the door on the night but not on their story. Because their story would continue in their children and grandchildren, in every student Zara taught, and every horse Quentin bred. It would continue in the kindness they had shown to strangers, the help they had offered to neighbors, the love they had spread throughout their community. And someday, when they were both gone and the ranch had passed to new generations, perhaps another desperate stranger would knock on that same door at midnight. And perhaps whoever answered would remember the story of Quentin and Zara, would remember that one act of kindness can change everything, would open the door without hesitation and offer help to someone who needed healing in ways they never expected. That was the true legacy they were leaving. Not land or money or possessions, but the understanding that love and kindness and generosity of spirit were the things that truly mattered. That opening your door and your heart to someone in need was how you built a life worth living. As they prepared for bed that night, moving through the familiar rituals of marriage, Quentin paused and pulled Zara into his arms. "What is this for?" she asked, though she was smiling. "For everything. For knocking on my door, for trusting me, for building this life with me. For 22 years of love and laughter and partnership. For giving me children and grandchildren and a reason to wake up smiling every morning. That is quite a list. I could make it longer. I know you could." She kissed him softly. "Thank you, too, for answering the door. For not turning me away. For seeing past the desperate stranger to the woman underneath. For giving me and Thomas a home when we had nothing. For loving me even when I was difficult. You are never difficult. I am frequently difficult." "Well, perhaps sometimes," he admitted. "But I love you anyway. I love you always." They climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for over 2 decades, and held each other in the darkness. Outside, the ranch was quiet, the horses settled in the barn, the land peaceful under the stars. Inside, the house breathed with the lives it sheltered, warm and secure. "Quentin," Zara said sleepily. "Yes, love. Do you think we did well? With our lives, with our children, with everything. I think we did better than well. I think we built something beautiful and lasting. I think we loved each other and our family and our community as best we could. What more can anyone ask of a life?" "Nothing," she murmured. "Nothing more at all." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms as they had for thousands of nights before, and would for thousands of nights to come. The ranch settled into darkness, but the love that filled every corner of that house burned as bright as the sun. And somewhere, perhaps, the universe smiled at these two people who had found each other in the darkness, who had healed each other's wounds, who had built a legacy of love that would ripple outward for generations. Two people who had proven that sometimes the most important door you will ever open is the one where a desperate stranger knocks at midnight, asking for help. Sometimes the medicine someone needs is not in a bottle or a bandage. Sometimes it is in kindness and compassion. Sometimes it is in a place to belong and a reason to hope. Sometimes healing comes not from science but from love, from opening your heart and your home to someone who needs both. Quentin and Zara had learned that lesson the night they met, and they had spent their entire marriage teaching it to everyone around them. It was a lesson their children would carry forward, and their grandchildren after them, and all the generations yet to come. The story that began with a midnight knock had become a legend in Abiquiu, told and retold until the details blurred but the truth remained sharp. The truth that love transforms, that kindness heals, that sometimes the person who asks for help ends up giving just as much as they receive. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the New Mexico mountains and painted the ranch house gold, Quentin and Zara would wake in each other's arms and begin another day of the beautiful life they had built together. Another day of loving each other and their family. Another day of being grateful for the desperate knock that had brought them together, and the brave choice they had both made to open their hearts to possibility. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it was, in every way that mattered, a story of perfect, enduring, transformative love.